This is Adam Benson from Vrge Strategies. I'm in Las Vegas taking part in Black Hat and DEF CON festivities, and I'm here with Robert Lee, CEO and founder of Dragos. You are one of the leading companies in the world when it comes to security infrastructure and cybersecurity, finding things in the grid, as people call it. And one of the things you found that's pretty amazing is crash override. There's a lot of news with that. Why don't we talk about that a little bit and what you found?
Absolutely. So the first ever cyber attack to take down a portion of a power grid was in Ukraine in 2015. I was fortunate enough to be part of the investigation with a couple other awesome gentlemen and women who really looked at that. What we looked at the first time, though, was an adversary who used malware to get in place, but it was actual human operations that took down the infrastructure. Basically, they learned how to use the grid systems against themselves. The second time this has occurred was almost a year later in Ukraine again in 2016. And that time, not a lot of people understood what was going on. We didn't have a lot of information. An anti-malware firm in Slovakia named ESIT ended up finding some malware that they were looking at, passed it to us in June to take a look at and understand a little bit more on the grid impact piece. And what was so striking about the malware that became known as crash override is the adversaries took all their lessons learned from 2015 and then codified it into now a scalable framework that instead of having 20 people on keyboard trying to take down a portion of a power grid, now you can just put in a piece of malware that does it for you when it's inside. That's obviously a bit concerning in sort of not only the scalability of it, but also the escalatory nature of an adversary who's made very public this tradecraft required to turn off the lights at one places.
I think I was reading that crash override actually contained more pieces and items than others would have thought might have been needed, which seemed really unique.
Well, it's alarming. So I think we'll get to the nuance aspect of it all, but when you look at crash override and its actual impact in Ukraine, it was one transmission level substation. Transmission sites tend to be the backbone of electric power in a country, but it only took it down for maybe an hour. Right? So a lot of people sort of looked the other way on it. I don't think it got a lot of attention, but what sort of concerned us about it is the point you just made, which is there was a lot of capability inside this framework that wasn't leveraged, and in our analysis it looks much more like a proof of concept than anything else. It's one thing to develop some understanding of how you might attack a place. It's another thing to develop out maybe malware and test it in your lab. It's an entirely different thing to actually target a real power grid, and understanding the exact impact you have is pretty difficult even for more sophisticated adversaries. So proof of concepts can sometimes be valuable.
This leads to the obvious question, which is how safe is the U.S. grid? There's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of people who are very nervous and they talk openly about their fear. You have some very interesting perspective on that, man. I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
So yeah, it's always interesting. I can't imagine being an average non-technical citizen these days. Things must be crazy and scary from everything from like election hacking to power grids going down, and there is needed nuance. So is it scary? Is it alarming? Does it deserve attention, focus? Yes, all the above. Are we all going to die? No. When you look at crash override as an example, it seems now that we've got this malware that can be put into a location that, well, why can't we just put it in every energy site in the world? Well, the problem is actually getting it in place. It's not always so easy, especially in the American power grid transmission sites. A lot of security is done around those. We want to do more, but it's not trivial. So the idea that it's just going to be on a worm and spread around is quite silly. You still have to have the human operations behind it. With what we've seen out of this team, you could absolutely see maybe 10, 15 sites they would get in, which is bad. Do I think we could bring down New York City or Houston or San Francisco for a couple hours, maybe even a day or two? Yeah, I think it's possible. I think we've seen that to some extent. But the scenarios are usually grid-wide and month-long. And as you go up in time, and it gets much more difficult, and then as you scale it out, it gets exponentially more difficult. And some of that is not necessarily for the benefit of the security we're doing, although the American power grid has done pretty good over the past decade or so to really increase their security. There's a lot more that needs to be done. Simply don't have a lot of visibility and knowledge on the threat landscape or the industrial environment itself sometimes. But what really helps us is the way that they've designed the grid to be safe and reliable. The hurricanes roll through and folks are going out to bring backup power. It's that kind of dedication, that kind of focus that has put us into a defensible situation. So I always say that we have a really defendable grid, but to make it defended, we need to start adding a little bit more human focus, putting those defenders in place. So long story short, this is a very alarming event. It's escalatory, and we could absolutely expect to see this tradecraft leverage in the future to think that we all need to go build bunkers and store dry food is maybe a little bit ridiculous.
That's a great relief. Where can people find you online? The website, Twitter handle?
Yeah, so Twitter is just Robert M. Lee, and then from a website, I'm over at dragos.com or robertmlee.org.
You should check out the report and the research that they've done, and of course you can find us at On the Verge of and at Vrge.us. We'll be back here with more from Black Hat and DEF CON, but for now, Robert, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.